What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, former world champion, superstar boxer Chris Algieri weighs in on the possibility of a massive mega showdown unification bout in the welterweight division with undefeated unified WBC IBF welterweight world champion superstar boxer Errol Spence Jr. and former 8 division world champion, currently the WBA welterweight world champion, iconic Filipino superstar boxer Manny "PACMAN" Pacquiao. Now, obviously, Chris Algieri has faced both guys. Okay, he was stopped by Errol Spence Jr. in his showdown with Errol Spence Jr. And he went the distance, but he was dropped multiple times by Manny Pacquiao. I believe he was dropped 6 times, if I'm not mistaken, by Manny Pacquiao in their showdown. So with that said, Chris Algieri obviously is qualified to break down, how he think this fight will play out, what he thinks it'll take for each guy to be successful in a showdown, right? Chris Algieri, interestingly enough, he stated that Manny Pacquiao has more power than Errol Spence Jr. He says because he equates it to speed. He says speed equals power, and because Manny Pacquiao has the speed and he also has just natural power, that when he hits you, it's the punches you don't see, so the speed equals power. So Chris Algieri, 24-3, 9 by way of knockout. He has some legendary performances against Ruslan Pavatnikov. He lost a unanimous decision to Manny Pacquiao. He lost to a unanimous decision to also Amir Khan. That was a very, very close fight. And then he was TKO'd by Errol Spence Jr. But he beat Emmanuel Taylor. So he has some credible wins. But most importantly, he's 5'10" with a 72-inch arm reach. He's very mobile. He's 36 years old right now. But he's very, very mobile, very, very durable. And like I said, against Manny Pacquiao, he was dropped maybe, I believe it was about 6 times in that fight, but Manny Pacquiao couldn't stop him. So Chris Algieri is tough, and Errol Spence stopped him. So with that said, that he stated that Errol Spence, is physically stronger than Manny Pacquiao. He says, but this is what gets me, is that he says that Errol Spence is definitely, by far, the more skilled technical guy in the ring. He says that Manny Pacquiao edge is going to be his speed and his power, because his speed equals power. He says, but by far, Errol Spence is the more skillful technical guy in the ring. He says, and don't get me wrong, he has a lot of power. He says, but he's just physically stronger. So he says, even in Manny Pacquiao's prime, this will be a very, very tough fight for Manny Pacquiao. Now, we did hear Manny Pacquiao when asked how will he fight Errol Spence and what would it take for him to beat Errol Spence, and Manny Pacquiao stated that speed. He says he studied Errol Spence Jr. He says speed is what you need to defeat Errol Spence Jr. If you don't have speed, you're not going to defeat him. And obviously, Manny Pacquiao has a lot of speed, a la what Chris Algieri is stating, that speed equals power for Manny Pacquiao, and he sees that transition into him having more power than Errol Spence Jr. But he said physically, Errol Spence is the bigger, stronger guy, and he says that he sees Errol Spence eventually moving up to bigger weight classes. But this is interesting, and shout out to FINO Boxing, because this interview is there, and the edge that Manny Pacquiao has from the southpaw stance is not there, obviously, when it comes to Errol Spence, because they're both southpaws, so they're going to be looking in the mirror. Now, one thing, undefeated rising welterweight superstar contender boxer Jerron Boots Ennis stated recently, when he talked about him having an edge over Errol Spence, undefeated former 3-division world champion, former undisputed junior welterweight world champion, and currently WBO welterweight world champion Terrence Bud Crawford, and Manny Pacquiao. He stated that he has the edge because one thing they all have in common is that they all predominantly fight out of the southpaw stance. Jerome Boots Ennis, like Terrence Crawford, can switch from southpaw to orthodox, and he says that southpaws don't like to face other southpaws. So that's interesting, right? So he said that that's why he would have the edge against all of these guys, because he's the bigger, more athletic guy. So he said that he would have an edge over them. Now in this fight, I guess this is going to come down to who's more comfortable and who's more uncomfortable with Errol Spence and Manny Pacquiao, because they both southpaws. The difference between Errol Spence and Manny Pacquiao that separates them from Terrence Crawford and Jerome Boots Ennis is that they're not naturally southpaws. They're orthodox fighters who are able to switch from southpaw to orthodox. But Errol Spence and Manny Pacquiao are natural southpaws. This is who they are. And so with that said, it's interesting to see how this would play out. But Errol Spence has a 72-inch arm reach. Errol Spence is 5'9". Errol Spence is obviously the younger guy at 30 years old. Manny Pacquiao is going on 42 years old, and Manny Pacquiao, has a 65.5-inch arm reach, I believe, maybe 67. That's pushing it. Manny Pacquiao is 5'5", 5'6" at best. So he's a short guy. He's the older guy. And the first thing to go is your reflexes and your athletic ability, meaning your speed. Now, Manny Pacquiao did display that he's still fast when he fought against former unified WBC, WBA welterweight world champion superstar boxer Keith one-time Thurman, when he beat Keith Thurman via unanimous decision. No, it was split decision, majority decision, or something of that nature. So it was a close fight, but in the beginning, Manny Pacquiao clearly won the first half of the fight. In the second half of the fight, Keith Thurman started to warm up. He started to come on, and he made it closer. But he got dropped in the fight. I believe it was the second round. And then in the 10th round, he was badly hurt to the body, Keith Thurman, that is, by Manny Pacquiao. So Manny Pacquiao still showed that he turned back the clock, but how many of those fights do he have left, right, in him at 42 years of age? Because he relies on his reflexes and his athletic ability. So his foot speed and his angles is what gives people the most problems with him. And like Chris Algieri said, it's the punches you don't see, because his speed equals power. And he says that he gives you all these weird angles, and he's pretty unorthodox in the ring. So he says that that's what gets most people. But he says that Errol Spence won't be flustered because Errol Spence is so technical. He says he attested to his amateur background. He says Errol Spence is never getting flustered in the ring. So he says nothing Manny Pacquiao is going to do is going to get Errol Spence to make too many mistakes. He don't make mistakes in the ring. This is what I've been saying, right? Errol Spence doesn't make a lot of mistakes. The one mistake is glaring to me that I see is when he's defensive and his opponents are on offensive. He doesn't transition from defense to offense too fluidly, right? He goes into a high guard, he goes into a shell, and he gives you your opportunities. When you're done in that exchange, he resets and he gets back to business, right? Back to regularly scheduled programming. But at the time, he'll go into a high guard and give you opportunities. That's why Kell Brook, former IBF welterweight world champion, British superstar boxer, had so much success against Errol Spence, because he was big, strong, welterweight who was technical and was coming forward and pressing the fight against Errol Spence. So in return, he was allowing Errol Spence, that is, was allowing Kell Brook to be successful and to get off on him because he smothers his own offense, right? So with that said, Errol Spence does, make adjustments. So he did eventually adjust to what Kell Brook was doing and pivoting off of it, going to Kell Brook's body, hooks to the body after pivots and things of that nature. And Errol Spence has a granite chin. So this is what Chris Algieri is referencing to when he says that the amateur background of Errol Spence shows up in the fight because he never gets flustered. So all the angles, all of the foot speed and all of the different movement that Manny Pacquiao presents to you in the ring is not going to affect Errol Spence, because Errol Spence is comfortable in the ring, right? He's cool, calm, and collective in the ring. He's comfortable. He's not going to get flustered. So he says it's going to be a long night for Manny Pacquiao. That's what Chris Algieri had to say regarding this fight. He said it's going to be a long night for Manny Pacquiao. Even in Manny Pacquiao's prime, he believed it would be a long night for Manny Pacquiao. And definitely at this point in time, it's going to be a long night because he says Errol Spence is a young, hungry, undefeated world champion who is looking to put another notch in a feather in his cap when it comes to his legacy, and Manny Pacquiao presents that. So he says that Errol Spence definitely going to get up for that fight. But let's just listen to what Chris Algieri had to say regarding this situation.
And even, people may have compared the speed of Khan and Manny, and it's always different. They're very different. Spence he's much stronger, physically stronger. Maybe not as his punches aren't as fast or as powerful as maybe Manny Pacquiao. Like power, I think of like speed and surprising. That's how I think about that. Right. But Spence is just physically strong in every way. Much bigger guy physically, taller, longer. Will probably end up in higher weight classes as his career progresses. But Spence was much more almost kind of traditional in his style. He's he actually has a much better technique than people give him credit for. Very good with his angles in and out, more linear than Pacquiao. Pacquiao was much more, angles and cutting to the side, whatever. Spence is much more linear, forward and back, but just very well schooled, an Olympian, and you can tell he had a big amateur background, and it shows in the pros. I'd be surprised if that fight were to happen, because I know that Freddie has talked in the past about having concern about fighting like really big welterweights.
So he's saying that Freddie Roach had concerns in the past about fighting big welterweights that are young, hungry, and strong, like a Errol Spence Jr. So he says that he'd be surprised if it happened. He definitely want to see it happen, but he'll be surprised if Freddie Roach approves of this fight.
But, Manny, it looked great against Keith Thurman. I was so impressed with that fight. Manny Pacquiao is something special, so I'll never count him out.
So he said that Manny Pacquiao is special, so he'll never count him out. But he don't see it's going to be a long night for Manny Pacquiao
in a fight. But that's an interesting fight, and I think it's a really tough fight for Pacquiao. I think Spence is a not only is he, Manny beat Margarito, who is a much bigger guy too, but he's not the skill set of an Errol Spence.
So you see, he says Errol Spence is just big, strong, young, hungry world champion. So Manny Pacquiao recently, I'm going to make another video. He just came out and he stated that he's definitely going to look to get a tune-up fight. By the time he fights his next fight, he'll have been out the ring for 2 years. Manny Pacquiao fought Keith Thurman in 2019. So now for Manny Pacquiao to come from a 2-year layoff and jump right in the ring with a Errol Spence or a Terrence Crawford just doesn't make business sense, right? Or sense for his career, his legacy, and just physical sense, right? Because he got to get acclimated. He's 42 years old. So he says that he definitely wants to face for Conor McGregor, UFC superstar, because he says that Conor McGregor, for one, he wants to know what it's like to grace the ring, grace the square circle with a UFC fighter. And for two, it's a tune-up fight for Manny Pacquiao to get his feet back wet. And then he says that, it's either Errol Spence or Terrence Crawford. Which makes most business sense for Manny Pacquiao at this point in time in his career is obviously Errol Spence Jr. And it's an easier fight to make because they're under the same umbrella, so to speak. He has PBC, Premier Boxing Champions advisor and founder Al Heyman in his corner, and so does Errol Spence. So it just makes all the sense in the world for that fight to come to fruition. So let's see how this all plays out. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notification. Follow me on Instagram at Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shout out to the entire LDBC. Shout out to New Media. Shout out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share the videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.